The first shot didn't sound like thunder. It sounded like a door deciding it was done being a door. Glass burst inward with a scream of shattered winter, and the whole diner flinched. Neon buzzing, fryer hissing, cheap vinyl booths vibrating like they knew what guns meant even before the people did. The cold rushed in so hard it felt alive, curling around ankles and climbing spines, stealing breath out of lungs. And in the middle of it, a girl in a faded uniform and boots held together by tape saw the barrels lift. And she heard her own voice tear out of her throat, raw and absolute. Get down. She didn't think. She didn't calculate. She didn't consider how small she was or how poor, or how nobody ever protected girls like her. She just moved. She jumped forward, arms out like she could catch violence with her body, like she could physically stop death from finding the man sitting in the darkest booth. For cracks snapped through the air. For impacts punched her back. For bullets, meant for a king, found her instead. And the man she saved didn't even flinch the way a human would. He turned his head slowly, eyes like midnight frost, and watched her fall into his arms as if fate had finally stopped running from him. Because he wasn't a man. Not really. He was the vampire king, feared, whispered about, blamed for every shadow that ever swallowed the city whole. And in the light of a dying diner sign, he watched an ordinary human girl take 4 bullets for a stranger. The world did not know it yet. But something had just snapped into place. A debt. A bond. A prophecy. And somewhere beneath the city, far below churches and sirens and the lies people told themselves to sleep, ancient magic stirred like a beast opening one red eye. Her name was Ivy Marlowe, and nobody ever said it gently. They said it like a mistake. Like she should apologize for existing. At Russo's diner, the word Ivy was usually followed by something else. Ivy, wipe table 9. Ivy, you forgot ketchup again. Ivy, stop staring off into space. The manager, Grant, said her name with a smile that never reached his eyes, like he enjoyed making her feel small in front of customers. Tonight he'd been worse. You're late, he'd hissed when she arrived, even though she wasn't. Try not to embarrass us. Us, as if Ivy belonged to some club of people who had never been hungry enough to count coins by street lamp. Ivy had swallowed the insult the way she swallowed everything. Quietly, carefully, because anything sharp could cut her on the way down. She hung her coat behind the kitchen door, smoothing the threadbare sleeves like that could make them look less tired. Her hair was pinned up in a bun that always came loose by midnight. Her hands were cracked from soap and hot water. Her cheeks were too pale. Her eyes looked older than 24. She was the kind of girl who could vanish in a crowd because the world had taught her it was safer that way. And yet, tonight, she couldn't vanish from herself. Because at 11:41 p.m., when the diner was nearly empty and the city outside looked like a watercolor of sleet and streetlight, the bell above the door rang. And the air changed. Not in a romantic way. Not in a handsome stranger way. In a predator entered the room way. Ivy looked up automatically, smile ready out of habit, and it almost died on her lips. He stepped inside like he owned the floor beneath his feet. Tall. Unhurried. Dressed in a long charcoal coat that looked too expensive for a place that smelled like burned coffee and onion rings. The fabric didn't cling to him, it obeyed him. Snow clung to his shoulders like it wanted permission to melt. His hair was dark, almost black, but not flat the way human hair looked in bad lighting. It carried a sheen like ink under moonlight. His face was sharp in an unfair way, high cheekbones, a mouth that looked carved rather than born, and skin so pale it made the neon sign's sickly glow seem warm. But it was his eyes that made Ivy's stomach tighten. They were an impossible shade, silver gray, like a winter lake right before it freezes. Not the friendly gray of clouds. The dangerous gray of steel. He didn't scan the room like a lost tourist. He scanned it like a man measuring exits, angles, threats. Like someone who didn't come here to eat. Like someone who came here to survive. He walked straight to the far back booth, booth 12, the one tucked against the wall where the flickering neon didn't quite reach. The booth where you could see both doors and keep no one behind you. Grant's posture changed the moment he saw him. Not fear exactly. Something closer to recognition. And greed. Grant rushed forward with a brightness that made Ivy's skin crawl. Evening, sir. Welcome to Russo's. Can I get you our? The man cut him off with a glance. Grant stopped mid-sentence like someone had pressed pause. The man spoke 5 words, voice low and smooth and old in a way Ivy couldn't explain. Coffee. Black. Leave it. Then he sat. That was it. No smile. No please. No small talk. And yet, the entire diner seemed to hold its breath around him. Ivy's fingers tightened around the coffee pot. She didn't want to go near booth 12. But Rent didn't care about instincts. Det didn't care about fear. And her little brother didn't care about anything except whether she'd be home tomorrow with groceries and a smile she didn't feel. So she went. Her boots squeaked on the worn linoleum as she crossed the aisle, carrying the pot like a shield. She could feel Grant's eyes on her, watching, almost hoping she'd mess up, because he liked having reasons to punish her. Ivy stopped at booth 12. The man didn't look up right away. His hands rested on the table, long fingers still as statues. No rings. No visible weapon. Yet everything about him screamed power, like the room itself was slightly smaller around him. "Coffee," Ivy said softly, trying to keep her voice steady. His gaze lifted, and it hit her like cold water thrown straight into her chest. For one heart-stopping second, she felt like he could see every bruise she didn't show, every fear she never admitted, every night she'd cried quietly so her brother wouldn't hear. Then, something flickered. Not softness. Not kindness. Recognition. Like he saw exhaustion and understood it in the way ancient creatures understood storms. "Thank you," he said. 2 words. But they sounded like he hadn't spoken them in a long time. Ivy poured carefully. She didn't spill a drop. When she finished, she tried to step away quickly. But his voice stopped her. "What is your name?" The question was simple. Yet it felt dangerous. Like stepping into a story you couldn't step out of. "Ivy," she answered before she could talk herself out of it. "Ivy," he repeated as if tasting the sound. His eyes lowered, briefly, to her name tag, then rose again. "You look tired." It wasn't an insult. It wasn't pity. It was a fact. Spoken like he rarely wasted words on things that weren't true. Ivy let out a weak breath that tried to become a laugh and failed. "Long shift." "Long life," he corrected quietly. She blinked. "Excuse me?" His gaze drifted past her, toward the front windows where snow blurred the city into a smear of lights. "This place is cold." "The heater's been broken for years," Ivy said automatically. "Owner keeps saying he'll fix it." "He doesn't." The man's mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Humans lie about repairs. Vampires lie about mercy." Ivy froze. Because nobody said vampires out loud in Russo's diner. Not seriously. Not like that. Her throat went dry. "That's a weird thing to say." His eyes returned to hers. "Is it untrue?" Ivy didn't answer. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, fading into the night like a warning the city had learned to ignore. Inside, Grant barked from behind the counter, "Ivy? Table 6 needs a refill." The man didn't even glance away, but Ivy felt the power in his stillness like gravity. She took a step back. Sorry? I have to." "Go," he said, like granting permission. Ivy turned quickly, heart beating too loud. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know that above the city's skyline, in penthouses no human could buy, there were rooms with blackout curtains and ancient symbols carved into marble. She didn't know that beneath the city, in hidden halls lined with stone older than the country itself, vampires bowed their heads when this man entered. She didn't know his name was King Alaric Veilcrest, the sovereign of the Night Court, Alpha of Alphas, ruler of a bloodline that had survived wars, plagues, and betrayals. She didn't know there was a price on his head tonight. She just knew he made the diner feel like a place where stories began. And Ivy Marlowe had never been the kind of girl stories began with. By 11:47, the diner was a quiet island. Old Mr. Harlan sat by the register, nursing cold decaf and muttering at a crossword. A couple in a corner booth whispered over fries they couldn't afford. The cook in the back clanged pans with the tired rhythm of someone who'd stopped dreaming years ago. Grant prowled behind the counter like a bored shark. Ivy kept moving, wiping, refilling, smiling when she had to, shrinking when she could. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She didn't need to look. She already knew what it would be. Final notice. Past due. Payment required. Debt was its own kind of monster. It didn't have teeth, but it ate the future anyway. Ivy had $28 in her account. Her brother's school needed fees by Monday. Their landlord had taped another warning to their door. And her mother was gone, leaving behind nothing but a stack of medical bills and the memory of hands that used to brush Ivy's hair back when she cried. Ivy swallowed hard and kept working. Because what else could she do? And then, the front door exploded inward. Not opened. Not pushed. The sound was so violent the neon sign above the window flickered like it wanted to die. 2 figures stood in the doorway. Long coats. Dark masks. Not cheap fabric but tactical, clean lines, professional. They didn't look around for food. They didn't hesitate. They stared straight at booth 12. Straight at the man with silver gray eyes. And Ivy saw the guns. Everything inside her slowed. Not in a dramatic time-stops way. In a sickening, real way, like her body went cold and her brain tried to make sense of something it didn't want to believe. Mr. Harlan gasped and ducked behind the counter, crossword papers fluttering to the floor like frightened birds. The couple screamed. Grant froze, mouth open, as if his greed had finally caught up with consequences. And booth 12? The man didn't move. He didn't flinch. He didn't even look surprised. He sat there as if he'd been waiting. As if this was simply the moment the night had been building toward. One of the masked men raised the gun. The barrel pointed straight at the vampire king's heart. Ivy's lungs forgot how to breathe. She didn't know why she screamed. She didn't know why she moved. Maybe it was because she'd seen too much cruelty and couldn't bear to watch one more person die. Maybe it was because something about the man's eyes, about the way he'd said her name, made him feel less like a stranger. Maybe it was because, for once in her life, her body decided she was allowed to be brave. Get down. She threw herself forward. Her shoulders slammed into the man's chest. He was hard, unnaturally solid, as if his body had been carved from cold stone under a moon that never warmed. And then the shots hit. 4 cracks. 4 impacts. Pain blossomed hot and bright across Ivy's back, ripping breath out of her. She didn't scream this time. She couldn't. Her mouth opened, but only a wet gasp came out. The world tilted. The diner lights blurred into smeared halos. She felt the man's arms catch her, fast, impossibly fast, like he'd moved before the bullets even finished flying. And for the briefest moment, right there against him, Ivy smelled something strange. Not cologne. Not coffee. Something ancient. Like night air in a forest that hasn't seen humans in centuries. His voice brushed her ear, low and furious. Why? Ivy tried to answer. She couldn't form words. Her hands trembled against his coat, fingers smearing something warm. Blood. Her blood. She heard Grant shouting. Heard someone crying. Heard the masked men stepping forward, confused, yelling into radios. But the man holding her didn't sound afraid. He sounded offended. Like death had just tried to touch what belonged to him. And then the world moved. Not like running. Like reality skipping. 1 second Ivy was in the diner, choking on pain and fear and the smell of fryer oil. The next, wind stabbed her face, snow swirling around them as if the sky had opened just to hide them. She barely registered the motion, only the sensation of speed so fast it made her stomach lurch. The city became streaks of light. Alleyways. Rooftops. Fire escapes. Empty streets glimmering under ice. Her body bounced once against his chest, and pain shot through her so sharp her vision went white. She tried to breathe. It hurt. She tried to speak. Her tongue felt heavy. Her eyes fluttered. The world felt far away, like she was already leaving it. But the arms around her tightened. The man's voice cut through the darkness like a blade. Stay with me. Ivy's eyelids trembled. She managed to whisper, barely air. Who are you? Silence for a heartbeat. Then, as if honesty cost him something, he answered. Someone who doesn't lose. Ivy wanted to laugh at that. Instead, she coughed and tasted metal. The snow above them glittered under moonlight. And then Ivy noticed something else, something her fading mind couldn't make sense of. Her blood, soaking into his coat, didn't look normal in the moonlight. It shimmered. Not red. Not fully. There was silver in it. A faint, luminous gleam like starlight caught in liquid. The man's breathing changed. Just slightly. Like even he hadn't expected that. His grip adjusted instantly, protective, urgent, and his pace somehow became faster. I knew it, he muttered, voice tight with something Ivy couldn't name. Knew what? Ivy tried to ask. But her eyes rolled back, darkness clawing at her. The last thing she felt before she slipped under was his hand against her cheek, cold, gentle, impossibly careful for someone who looked like he could break worlds. And the last thing she heard was him speaking into a phone, voice like stone. Prepare the sanctum. Now. Pause, someone answering, frightened. My king, the covenant forbids. I don't care what the covenant forbids, the king snapped. If she dies, the city will drown in blood. And then the world went away. When Ivy woke, she didn't know she'd woken at first. She thought she was still falling. Everything felt weightless, floating between pain and nothing. There were voices around her, muffled, echoing. A steady beep 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 somewhere near her head, like a machine trying to remind her heart what to do. The air smelled clean, too clean. Like antiseptic and cold stone. Her eyelids were heavy. Her body hurt in a deep way, like every nerve had been struck with lightning and left humming. She tried to move her fingers. Something tugged gently at her wrist. A tube. She cracked her eyes open. The ceiling above her wasn't the diner ceiling. It wasn't even a hospital ceiling. It was carved stone, dark and smooth, etched with symbols that looked like art and warning at the same time. Soft lights glowed from hidden seams, pale and blue-white, like moonlight trapped behind glass. She turned her head slowly, throat aching. And she saw him. The man, no, the king, sat in a chair beside her bed, still as a statue. His coat was gone. His shirt sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms that looked too strong to belong in any normal world. There was blood on his hands. Not splattered. Smeared. As if he'd been holding her wounds shut with his own fingers. His eyes were fixed on her face with an intensity that made Ivy's breath catch. Not hunger. Not cruelty. Something sharp, possessive, furious. Like he'd been bargaining with death and losing his patience. Ivy swallowed, pain flashing. Where am I? His gaze didn't soften, but his voice lowered. Safe. That's not an answer. The corner of his mouth twitched, a hint of something almost human. You are beneath Mercy Hospital. Beneath the city. Beneath everything you think is real. Ivy's heart stuttered. Why? She whispered. Why bring me here? I'm nobody. He leaned forward slowly, the way a predator moves when it wants you to understand you can't run. You took 4 bullets meant for me. Ivy's chest tightened, a wave of memory crashing back. Glass, guns, cold, pain. She flinched. His voice became quieter, and somehow that made it more dangerous. Humans do not do that for strangers. Ivy's eyes stung. Someone was going to die. So you chose yourself? I didn't. Ivy swallowed hard. I didn't choose anything. I just moved. His gaze dropped to the blanket over her torso, as if he could see through it to the wounds beneath. Those bullets were silver, blessed and cursed. They were meant to kill what I am. Ivy's lips parted. What you are. A slow pause. Then he said it as if the truth was nothing more than another fact. I am Alaric Veilcrest. The name hit the air like a bell. Even Ivy, who lived in the part of town where myths were told as jokes, knew that name. A story you whispered if you wanted to scare someone. A legend you didn't say too loudly because someone might be listening. The Vampire King, Ivy breathed. Alaric's eyes held hers. Yes. Fear should have swallowed her. But pain and shock made everything feel unreal. She stared at him, searching his face for some sign this was a prank, a dream, a fever hallucination. He didn't blink. I saved you, Ivy whispered. You did, he said. And now what? Her voice shook. Do I owe you something? Alaric's gaze sharpened, almost amused. No, Ivy Marlowe. His voice lowered, and the way he said her name made her skin prickle. I owe you. Before Ivy could answer, the door to the room opened, soundless, gliding. A man entered. If Alaric looked like a king, this man looked like the shadow behind the throne. Tall, dark-eyed, dressed in black with a red pin at his collar. His hair was tied back neatly. His expression was controlled, but his gaze flicked to Ivy with open shock. My king, the man murmured, bowing his head. The blood mage is here. Alaric didn't look away from Ivy. Bring him. The shadow man hesitated. The Covenant. Alaric's voice turned to ice. If the Covenant wants her dead, the Covenant can come and try. The man swallowed and left immediately. Ivy's pulse quickened. Blood mage. Alaric's gaze finally softened, just a fraction, like moonlight slipping through clouds. You should not be alive. Ivy went still. What? He leaned closer, voice barely above a whisper. 4 silver-cursed bullets. In your body. A human heart should have stopped already. Ivy's mouth went dry. But, I'm here. Alaric's eyes glittered. Yes. A knock, soft, then the door opened again. An older man entered, wearing a dark coat that looked like it belonged to another century. His hands were stained faintly with ink and something darker. His eyes were pale, like they'd seen too much and chosen not to blink anymore. He approached Ivy's bed with a reverence that frightened her more than fear ever could. He placed 2 fingers against her wrist, closed his eyes, breathed in. Then his eyes snapped open, wide. My king, he whispered, voice trembling. It's impossible. Alaric's voice was calm, but the air around him tightened. Say it. The blood mage looked at Ivy like she was a locked door no one expected to find. She carries silver light, he breathed. Not poison. Not curse. Ivy's throat tightened. What does that mean? The blood mage's gaze flicked to Alaric, terrified and awestruck at once. It means, he said slowly, The girl you pulled from death is not ordinary. Alaric's eyes never left Ivy's face. And when he spoke, his voice wasn't cold anymore. It was something deeper. Something that sounded like fate waking up. It means, Alaric said quietly, they sent assassins to kill me tonight, and instead they delivered me my answer. Ivy's breath caught. Answer to what? She whispered. Alaric leaned forward, and the way he looked at her made her feel like the whole world had narrowed into this single moment. To the question I have been asking the darkness for 500 years, he murmured. Who will stand beside me when the war begins? Ivy's heart pounded painfully. War, Covenant, Silverlight, Vampire King. None of it made sense. And yet, deep in her chest, something stirred. A strange warmth, like a candle flame lighting inside bones that had always been cold. The blood mage swallowed, voice shaky. My king, if the Night Court learns she exists. Alaric's lips curved into something that was not a smile. Let them learn, he said. Then he reached out, and with a gentleness that didn't fit his power, he brushed Ivy's hair back from her forehead. You were brave when no one told you to be, he whispered. You bled for someone you didn't know. Ivy's eyes burned with tears she didn't understand. Alaric's voice dropped even lower. And now, he said, I will make sure the world never hurts you like that again. Somewhere deep beneath the city, ancient stone trembled as if it agreed. And Ivy realized with sudden terrifying clarity, she hadn't just saved a stranger. She had stepped into a world of monsters and kings. And the most dangerous one of all, was looking at her like she belonged to him. When Ivy Marlowe learned the truth, it wasn't with a dramatic confession or a courtroom-style reveal. It was with silence. The kind of silence that presses into your ears until you hear your own heartbeat and realize it sounds too loud in a place built for secrets. She lay in a bed that wasn't a bed really, more like a carved stone cradle disguised under silk sheets so soft they felt unreal against her battered skin. The air was cool and clean as if the world above had never been allowed to breathe down here. Pale lights glowed from seams in the walls, not electric exactly but alive, a cold luminescence that reminded her of moonlight reflected on ice. And beside her sat the Vampire King. Alaric Veilcrest did not fidget like a man waiting in a hospital chair. He didn't check his phone. He didn't stare at the clock. He didn't pretend things would be fine. He watched Ivy as if her breathing was the most important event in the city. Which made no sense because people like Ivy were never important to men like him. Yet every time her chest rose, painfully, shakily, his shoulders eased by a fraction as if he'd been holding back a storm. The blood mage, Casimir they'd called him, stood at the foot of the bed with a look that didn't match his age. Not fear. Not reverence. Something closer to a dread. My king, Casimir said quietly, hands clasped behind his back as if even his fingers weren't allowed to shake. The silver curse is still in her wounds. It's burning through her like acid. Ivy tried to lift her head, but pain slammed her back down. She clenched her teeth, refusing to make a sound. Alaric noticed anyway. His gaze snapped to her face and the air changed like the room itself leaned toward him. Do not speak of her like she is not here, he said. Casimir's throat bobbed. Yes, my king. Alaric leaned forward, placing his hand lightly against Ivy's blanket-covered abdomen, exactly where the worst of the pain lived. The cold of his skin seeped through the fabric like relief. Ivy's breath hitched. It wasn't just cold. It was steady. Like a calm hand on a shaking world. You are in the sanctum, Alaric said, voice low enough that it felt like it belonged only to her. No one can enter without my permission. Ivy swallowed carefully. So, I'm trapped. His eyes flashed, just once, like offended lightning. No, he said. You are protected. There was a difference in his tone, and Ivy felt it like a line drawn in stone. Protected meant she had value. Protected meant someone wanted her alive. Protected meant she had become a piece on someone else's board. And Ivy Marlowe had spent her whole life being moved around by people who never asked if she wanted to be played. She forced her voice to stay steady. I didn't ask for this. Alaric's gaze held hers, and for a second his expression looked almost tired. You didn't ask for bullets either, he murmured. Yet you took them. That was the problem. He kept coming back to that, her choice, her body moving before fear could stop it. As if one act of bravery had rewritten her entire identity. Ivy's eyelids fluttered. I'm just a waitress. Casimir made a sound, a tiny involuntary noise like a laugh that died immediately under Alaric's glance. Alaric didn't smile, but something in his eyes sharpened. No, he said. You are not. Then he looked at Casimir. Show me. Casimir hesitated again, and Ivy felt the room tighten around that hesitation. My king, Casimir began. Alaric's voice became soft, which was worse. If you say covenant one more time, Alaric said, I will remove your tongue and feed it to the council as a reminder that my patience is older than their laws. Casimir went white. Then he stepped forward, pulling a small vial from inside his coat. It was glass, thin, delicate. Inside, something moved like liquid starlight. Ivy's stomach turned. What is that? She whispered. Casimir didn't answer her. He couldn't. His eyes were fixed on Alaric. Alaric nodded once. Casimir approached Ivy's bedside and gently lifted her left hand. His touch was careful, almost respectful. He pricked her finger with a tiny silver needle. Ivy flinched, more from instinct than pain. A bead of blood rose. But it didn't look like normal blood. Even in this cold light, it shimmered, red threaded with faint, luminous silver. Ivy stared, horrified. That's, she whispered. That's not right. Casimir's lips parted. It's silver light. Alaric's eyes narrowed. Say it clearly. Casimir swallowed. She carries a bloodline that should not exist, my king. Silverlight is older than our courts. Older than the Night Covenant. Older than the First Throne. Ivy's heart hammered painfully. I don't understand. Casimir looked at her now, and his gaze wasn't cruel, just heavy. Humans, he said slowly, do not survive silver-cursed bullets. And they do not bleed like this. Ivy's hand trembled in his grasp. Alaric's voice cut through, calm as winter. Tell her what she is. Casimir's mouth worked as if the words fought to leave. Then he said, you are a key. Ivy blinked. A key to what? Casimir's eyes flicked to Alaric again. Alaric answered himself, voice turning into something that made Ivy's skin prickle. To a door I have been forbidden to open. Ivy's throat tightened. I didn't even know vampires were real until 10 minutes ago. Alaric's gaze softened slightly, just enough to make her breath catch. And yet, he said, you screamed for me to get down. You moved without knowing what I am. That is not normal fear behavior. Ivy swallowed hard. I was trying to save a stranger. Alaric's eyes flashed. You saved a king. The words echoed against stone. And Ivy realized something terrifying. He wasn't grateful in a normal way. He was claiming a debt. Like ancient rules had been triggered the moment her blood hit his coat. Casimir stepped back, hands shaking now despite his attempt at composure. I can slow the silver curse, he said, voice tight. But removing the bullets completely will require blood magic at the edge of what the covenant allows. Alaric didn't blink. Do it. Casimir's gaze darted. My king, if the council learns you used forbidden blood rites for a human. Alaric stood in one smooth motion. The temperature dropped. Ivy felt it in her bones. I did not ask for their permission to rule, he said quietly. And I will not ask for their permission to repay a life debt. Life debt. The phrase struck Ivy like a slap. She tried to sit up. Wait, what? Life debt. Alaric turned to her, and the cold fury on his face eased into something else, something controlled. In our world, he said, if a mortal saves a royal's life, the royal becomes bound by law older than any covenant. Ivy's voice cracked. Bound how? Alaric's eyes held hers. To protect you. Ivy's stomach twisted. That sounds like a fancy way of saying I'm not allowed to leave. Alaric's jaw tightened. For a moment, Ivy thought he might snap, might remind her exactly how little her opinion mattered to someone like him. But instead, he exhaled. Slow. As if he was forcing himself to learn something he'd never practiced. Ivy, he said, and her name sounded different on his tongue now, less like curiosity, more like truth. If you want to leave, I will not chain you. She stared at him, not believing it. He continued, voice lower. But you will not be safe above. Casimir's eyes widened slightly, as if he hadn't expected Alaric to admit that. Ivy's throat tightened. Why not? Alaric's expression darkened. Because those assassins were not human. Ivy's blood went cold. You said they were wearing masks. They were wearing human masks, Alaric corrected. Underneath they were night-born. Casimir whispered, Bloodlords? Ivy's eyes snapped to Casimir. Bloodlords? Casimir looked like he wished the stone floor would swallow him. The rival families, he said. The ones who want the throne. Ivy's pulse raced. And they tried to kill him, in a diner? Alaric's mouth curved into something that wasn't humor. They wanted witnesses, he said. They wanted human blood spilled with mine. They wanted the city to blame me. They wanted chaos. Ivy's hands clenched into the sheets. So I was collateral. Alaric's gaze sharpened. No. Ivy looked at him. His voice lowered, dangerous and certain. You were a complication they did not predict. Casimir swallowed, eyes fixed on Ivy's shimmering blood. Silverlight makes her valuable. To us. To them. Ivy's chest tightened. Valuable like what? Like a treasure? Alaric's eyes turned cold. Like a weapon. Ivy's stomach dropped. Alaric stepped closer to her bed, lowering himself to sit again, but this time his presence felt different. Not distant. Not a king watching a patient. More like a predator guarding the only fire in a blizzard. You took 4 bullets for me, he said, voice quiet. You did not know my name. You did not know my world. Yet you stepped into a war and survived. Ivy's eyes burned. I didn't survive because I'm brave. I survived because you dragged me down here and did magic. Alaric's gaze flicked to her wounds, then back to her face. Magic did not keep your heart beating. Your blood did. Ivy swallowed. She hated how small her voice sounded. So what happens now? Alaric's eyes held hers for a long moment. Then he said, now you heal. And then? Then, he said softly, I teach you the truth. Ivy's skin prickled. The truth about what? Alaric's expression sharpened again. About the night. Pause. About why your blood shines. Another pause. And about why the Covenant will try to take you from me. The words from me struck her like a possessive hand closing around her wrist. Ivy's fear turned sharp. You don't get to own me. The room went still. Even Casimir froze. Alaric stared at her, and for one breath Ivy thought she'd gone too far, thought she'd reminded the Monster King that she was just a human girl daring to talk back. Then Alaric did something that made her chest hurt in a new way. He lowered his gaze. Not submissive, but respectful. You are correct, he said, voice quiet. I do not own you. Ivy's throat tightened, surprised. Alaric looked back up, eyes like frost. But the night will try to, he added. And I will not allow it. Ivy's hands trembled. Because there was something terrifying about being protected by someone who could destroy worlds. And yet, she couldn't deny the strange safety in his certainty. Casimir cleared his throat carefully. My king. To remove the bullets, I will need her to drink something. Ivy's eyes snapped to him. No. Casimir flinched. It is not poison. It is. Alaric's voice cut through. Explain. Casimir swallowed. Her wounds are burning with silver curse. Human medicine cannot touch it. Only blood can neutralize blood. Ivy's stomach turned. Blood? From who? Casimir's eyes flicked to Alaric. Ivy's heart slammed against her ribs. Alaric didn't look away from Ivy when he spoke. Mine? He said simply. Ivy's voice shook. Absolutely not. Casimir looked like he might faint. Alaric's expression didn't change. You will die. Ivy's eyes stung. So I'm supposed to drink vampire blood like that's normal? Alaric's gaze softened, barely. It will not turn you, he said. Not unless you take it willingly under the full ritual. This is only to heal what silver has burned. Ivy stared at him. Every survival instinct screamed no. But her back felt like fire. Her lungs felt like they were full of broken glass. And she could feel her body weakening with every minute she argued. Ivy's voice cracked. Why are you doing this? Alaric's eyes darkened, something ancient moving behind them. Because you screamed for me to get down, he murmured. Because you bled for me. His voice dropped, and the words felt like they carried weight older than the city above. Because the law of the Night Court says I must repay you, and my own conscience says I must. Conscience. A vampire king saying conscience should not have mattered. But it did. Ivy swallowed hard, tears burning. Fine, she whispered. Do it. Casimir moved quickly, almost relieved. He produced a small cup made of black metal etched with symbols. Alaric stood, stepping to the side of the bed. For the first time, Ivy saw uncertainty flicker in his face. Not fear. Not doubt. But something like restraint. He pressed his thumb to his own wrist. With a single sharp motion, so quick Ivy barely saw it, his skin split. Dark blood welled up, thicker than human blood, almost black with a faint crimson sheen. Ivy's stomach lurched. But then she smelled it. Not rot. Not gore. Something rich, warm, intoxicating, like dark wine and winter spice and lightning in the air. Made her head spin. Casimir caught the blood in the cup with careful hands. He approached Ivy. Drink, he said softly. Ivy stared at the cup. Her hands trembled as she took it. Her eyes flicked to Alaric, who watched her like a statue holding back a storm. Ivy's throat tightened. Then she lifted the cup and drank. The taste was nothing like she expected. Not metallic. Not disgusting. It was warm like liquid heat sliding down her throat, and it spread through her body instantly, through her veins, through her bones, chasing the silver fire away. Pain flared once, sharp enough to steal her breath. Then relief. Her lungs filled properly for the first time since the diner. Her back still hurt, but the burning eased into a dull ache. Her heartbeat steadied. Ivy gasped, eyes wide. Casimir exhaled shakily. It worked. Alaric didn't move, but Ivy saw his jaw unclench slightly, as if he'd been holding his own breath. Ivy swallowed, voice hoarse. What did you just put in me? Alaric's gaze locked onto her. My blood, he said. Ivy's stomach flipped. She looked down at her hands. Her skin looked the same, but she felt different. Warmer. Sharper. As if the world had turned up its volume. She could hear distant footsteps beyond the walls. She could smell something faint, like incense and stone and roses. Ivy's eyes widened. Why can I? Casimir's face went pale again. Oh no. Alaric's gaze snapped to him. Explain. Casimir backed up a step, staring at Ivy like she was a prophecy walking. Silverlight and royal blood, he whispered. Together. Alaric's voice turned deadly calm. Casimir. Casimir swallowed hard. My king, the bond may have begun. Ivy's breath caught. Bond? Alaric's eyes widened slightly, just a flicker, then narrowed into control. Ivy looked between them, panic rising. What bond? What are you talking about? Casimir's voice shook. The law of life-death is not just political. It is magical. When royal blood is given to the one who saved the king, fate recognizes it. Ivy's chest tightened. Recognizes it as what? Casimir's eyes flicked to Alaric with terror. As a claim, he whispered. Ivy's face went cold. You said you don't own me. Alaric's voice was tight now, controlled like a man gripping a blade by the sharp end. I don't, he said. This is not ownership. Ivy's voice cracked. Then what is it? Alaric stepped closer. His presence filled the room like a storm cloud. But his eyes were fixed on her with a strange intensity that wasn't hunger. It was awareness. Like he could feel her heartbeat in his own chest. Like something invisible had wrapped around both of them and pulled tight. Alaric's voice dropped. It is the night declaring that your life is now tied to mine. Ivy's breath came too fast. No, she whispered. I didn't agree to that. Alaric's jaw clenched. I know, he said. Then, for the first time since she'd met him, Ivy heard something in his voice that sounded like regret. And that, Alaric murmured, is why I will give you a choice. Ivy stared at him, shaking. What choice? Alaric's gaze softened a fraction, like moonlight touching the edge of a blade. You can stay, he said. Heal here. Learn what you are. Let me protect you from the bloodlords. Pause. Or, he continued, voice quiet, I can return you to the surface, wipe your memory of me, and you can go back to your life, ignorant and unguarded. Ivy's chest tightened. You can wipe my memory? Alaric didn't blink. Yes. Ivy's hands clenched the sheets. And you'd let me leave? Alaric stared at her. His voice was low, almost rough. I would hate it, he admitted. But yes. Ivy's eyes stung. She wanted to say she'd choose freedom. She wanted to say she didn't want to be dragged into vampire wars and ancient covenants. But then she remembered the diner. The guns. The way those masked men looked straight past everyone else like only she and Alaric mattered. And she remembered something worse. Grant. The landlord. The debt. The life that chewed her up and never apologized. Going back meant going back to being helpless. Going back meant being the girl nobody saved. And now, the night had already seen her. The night had already tasted her blood. Ivy swallowed hard. Alaric watched her, utterly still. Waiting. Not commanding. Not forcing. Just present. Ivy's voice shook, but it came out clear. If I stay, she whispered, you promise you won't treat me like property. Alaric's gaze held hers like an oath. I swear on my crown, he said. Casimir inhaled sharply, like that oath meant something heavy and irreversible. Ivy's throat tightened. And you promise you'll tell me the truth. All of it. Alaric nodded once. All of it. Ivy's heart hammered. She was terrified. But for the first time in years she also felt something else. A strange, fragile thing. Like possibility. Then, Ivy whispered, voice cracking, I stay. Alaric's eyes flashed, not triumph, relief. But beneath that relief was something darker. something like destiny tightening its grip. Casimir stepped back, whispering under his breath. The Covenant will feel it. Alaric's gaze cut to him. Let them. Then he turned back to Ivy, and his voice softened in a way that made her chest ache. Rest, he murmured. When you wake, I will show you my world. Ivy's eyelids grew heavy, exhaustion crashing over her like a wave. But before she drifted, she felt Alaric's cold fingers brush her hand, careful, almost hesitant. And in that touch she felt it. A thread. Invisible. Tight. Like a heartbeat that wasn't hers, answering her anyway. Somewhere far above, the city kept pretending monsters weren't real. But down here, beneath stone and magic, Ivy Marlowe's fate had just changed. Not because she was chosen by a prince in a fairy tale. Because she had thrown herself into gunfire, and survived. And the vampire king, who had never belonged to anyone, was beginning to belong to her. The night learns her name. Ivy dreamed of fire and moonlight. Not the gentle kind of fire meant for warmth, but silver flames that burned without heat, threading through her veins like memory waking up. She stood in a forest that didn't exist on any map, trees black as ink, their leaves whispering in a language she somehow understood without ever learning. Above her, the moon was enormous and fractured, as if something had tried to break it and failed. And somewhere in the distance, something was calling her. Not with words. With hunger. With need. With a pull that felt exactly like the thread she'd felt in the sanctum. Tight, invisible, impossible to ignore. Ivy woke with a sharp breath, sitting upright before pain reminded her body it wasn't ready for that. She gasped, hands flying to her back. No fire. No agony. Just soreness. Deep, bruised soreness, but nothing like before. Her eyes widened. The wounds were healing. She looked down at herself. The stone bed was gone, replaced by a wide, low couch draped in dark fabric that shimmered faintly. Her uniform was gone too. She wore a simple black dress now, soft, sleeveless, cut modestly but elegant in a way she'd never worn before. It didn't feel like a costume. It felt like it belonged. The room was different as well. No longer a medical chamber, the space looked like a private suite carved directly from stone and shadow. Tall pillars lined the walls, etched with symbols that glowed faintly when she focused on them. Heavy curtains framed a wide archway that opened onto something impossible. A balcony. Beyond it, the city stretched out beneath her, not the city she knew. The city breathed. Lights glimmered in colors Ivy had no names for, drifting like constellations through darkness. Towers rose and fell like waves frozen in stone. Bridges arched across open air without visible support. The night sky above wasn't empty, it pulsed, alive, thick with magic. Her heart began to race. She swung her legs over the edge of the couch slowly, half expecting her knees to buckle. They didn't. She stood. Steady. Stronger than she remembered being. I told you the healing would change how you move. The voice came from behind her. Ivy spun. Alaric stood near the archway, arms folded loosely across his chest. He wasn't wearing his coat tonight. Instead he wore black, tailored, sharp, simple. No crown. No visible weapon. But power radiated from him anyway, quiet and immense. Ivy's chest tightened. How long was I asleep? She asked. 6 hours, he replied. Longer than I expected. Her brows knit. That's not long. For humans, he said gently. No. She hesitated, then asked the question that had been clawing at her since she opened her eyes. Did it work? Alaric's gaze flicked, briefly, to her back. The silver curse is gone. Ivy let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. And the bullets? Removed. Her hand flew instinctively to her spine. She felt smooth skin beneath fabric. No bandages. No pain. Her throat tightened. I should be dead. Yes, Alaric said simply. She looked at him, startled by the honesty. But you're not, he continued. And that matters. Silence stretched between them, heavy but not uncomfortable. Ivy finally asked, what happens now? Alaric studied her for a long moment. Then he gestured toward the balcony. Come. She hesitated only a second before following him. The stone beneath her bare feet was cool but not cold. As she stepped onto the balcony, the full scope of the city revealed itself, and Ivy's breath caught painfully in her chest. This wasn't just a hidden section of her city. This was another world layered beneath it. Welcome, Alaric said quietly, to the night court. Ivy stared. Below them, figures moved through illuminated streets, some human, some not. She saw eyes glowing in the dark. Wings folding against backs. shadows that moved without bodies. The air itself shimmered with power. Her voice came out small. They live here. All of them. Yes. And above us, they pretend this doesn't exist. Alaric's mouth curved faintly. Humans are very good at ignoring what frightens them. Ivy swallowed. And I'm just here now? Alaric turned to her. You are under my protection. She flinched slightly. You said you wouldn't cage me. I am not, he replied calmly. You are free to walk this city as my guest. No one will touch you without answering to me. Her heart skipped. That sounds like fear. It is, he said without apology. Ivy looked back at the city, processing too many things at once. Why show me this? She asked. Because secrets rot, Alaric said. And because the Covenant already knows you exist. Her stomach dropped. Already? Alaric's gaze darkened. The bond flared when you drank my blood. They felt it. Ivy hugged her arms to herself. So I'm a beacon now. Yes. That's comforting, she muttered. For a moment Alaric looked almost amused. Then the air shifted. Ivy felt it before she heard it, a pressure change like the atmosphere tightening. Alaric straightened. Stay here, he said. The doors behind them opened. Casimir entered quickly, his expression tight. My king. We have a problem. Alaric didn't turn. Speak. The Western Bloodlord House has sent an envoy, Casimir said. They request audience. Ivy's pulse jumped. Envoy? As in, diplomat. As in threat wearing polite words, Casimir replied grimly. Alaric finally turned, eyes like frostbitten steel. When? They are already within the outer ring. Ivy's breath hitched. They know I'm here. Casimir glanced at her. They know someone is. Alaric was silent for a moment. Then he said, Prepare the throne hall. Casimir hesitated. My king, bringing her there? I will not hide her, Alaric snapped. Hiding invites predators. Ivy's heart pounded. Wait, what throne hall? Alaric looked at her. And in his gaze was something like resolve, and something like apology. The place where kings are tested, he said. Ivy swallowed. Tested how? By those who wish to take what is mine. Her stomach twisted. And I'm what? Bait. Alaric stepped closer. His voice lowered. You are not bait. You are truth. She shook her head, overwhelmed. I don't belong in a throne hall. I can barely pay rent. Alaric's eyes softened, not with pity, but with something like understanding. You belong because you stood between me and death, he said quietly. The knight respects courage. Ivy laughed weakly. Then the knight has terrible standards. A flicker of something warm crossed his face. Perhaps, he said. Moments later, Ivy found herself walking beside him through corridors that seemed to shift with every step. Torches flared as they passed, flames changing color in response to Alaric's presence. She felt eyes on her everywhere. Curious. Assessing. Hungry. Alaric walked slightly ahead, but never far. Always close enough that she felt his presence like a shield. The throne hall was vast. Columns rose into darkness above. The floor was polished obsidian, reflecting torchlight like a dark mirror. At the far end sat the throne, carved from a single block of black stone veined with silver. Alaric ascended the steps with effortless authority. He turned. Extended a hand. The hall went still. Every eye followed that motion. Ivy stared at his hand. It would be easy to step back. To refuse. To remind herself she was just a human girl who didn't belong here. But she remembered the diner. The guns. The moment when she'd moved without thinking. So she placed her hand in his. The contact sent a shock through her, not painful but intense. The thread between them tightened, humming. Whispers rippled through the hall. Alaric guided her to stand beside the throne, not behind it. Beside. Casimir's eyes widened. Alaric seated himself. And the night court knelt. Not to Ivy. But not away from her either. The doors at the far end opened. 3 figures entered. Tall. Elegant. Deadly. Their eyes glowed red as embers. The center one smiled, revealing fangs polished like art. My king, he said smoothly. We come in peace. Alaric's voice was calm. Then you have chosen the wrong city. The envoy's gaze slid to Ivy. Interest sharpened into hunger. There she is, he murmured. The silver-blooded human. Ivy's heart slammed. Alaric's grip tightened on the throne arm. She is under my protection, he said. Speak carefully. The envoy chuckled. Protection is temporary. Blood is eternal. Ivy felt something stir in her chest. What? Her blood responded. The envoy frowned slightly. Ah, she feels it too. Alaric leaned forward. And for the first time, Ivy heard the full weight of his power in his voice. You will leave, he said, and you will forget this place. The envoy's smile faded. Or. Alaric's eyes burned silver. Or I remind you, he said softly, why your ancestors bowed. The air cracked. The envoy stiffened, then bowed, shallow but undeniable. We will be watching, he said to Ivy before turning away. The night always claims what shines. They left. The doors closed. The hall exhaled. Ivy's knees nearly gave out. Alaric was there instantly, steadying her with one hand at her back. You did well, he murmured. I didn't do anything, she whispered. You stood, he replied. That is enough. She looked up at him, emotions tangling painfully in her chest. I don't want to be a weapon, she said. Alaric met her gaze. Then don't be, he said quietly. Be yourself. Ivy laughed softly, exhausted. That's a terrible plan. Perhaps, he said. But it is yours. For a moment, the world narrowed again. Just them, the thread between their hearts humming. And Ivy realized something that terrified her more than vampires or covenants ever could. She trusted him. And somewhere deep within the night court, something ancient and dangerous began to whisper her name. The night did not sleep. It watched. From the moment Ivy left the throne hall, she felt it, the weight of unseen eyes, the murmur of whispers that slid through stone and shadow alike. The city beneath the city pulsed with curiosity now, with rumor and fear and something close to reverence. The silver-blooded human. The girl who stood beside the throne. The one the king did not hide. Ivy walked beside Alaric through corridors that twisted like living things, her heartbeat slowly settling even as her mind refused to rest. The adrenaline from the throne hall still buzzed through her veins, mingling with the strange warmth left behind by his blood. She finally broke the silence. They're not done, she said quietly. Alaric didn't look at her. No. They'll come back, she pressed. Yes. Her hands curled into fists. Then why didn't you destroy them? Alaric stopped. The torches lining the corridor dimmed instantly, reacting to his stillness. He turned to her slowly, and for the first time since she'd met him, Ivy saw something raw behind his composure. Not rage but restraint stretched thin. Because, he said, killing an envoy is a declaration of war. Ivy swallowed. Isn't that already happening? Alaric's gaze sharpened. Not yet. She studied his face, trying to reconcile the man who had threatened bloodshed without blinking with the king who now chose patience over violence. You're holding back, she said. Yes. For me? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he resumed walking and Ivy hurried to keep up. For the city, he said finally. For the humans above who would burn if the night erupted below. For the balance that keeps both worlds alive. She frowned. And for yourself? Alaric's steps slowed. For myself, he admitted quietly, I have already chosen. The words lingered between them, heavy with meaning he didn't explain. They reached a door Ivy hadn't seen before, tall, carved with the same silver-veined symbols that marked the throne. Alaric pressed his palm to the stone. The door opened without a sound. Inside was a chamber unlike any she'd seen yet. It wasn't dark. Moonlight poured in through a wide opening in the ceiling, bathing the room in silver glow. The floor was circular, etched with runes that hummed faintly beneath Ivy's feet. At the center stood a shallow pool of water so clear it looked like glass. What is this place? Ivy asked. Alaric closed the door behind them. The moon well. Her skin prickled. That sounds important. It is, he said. This is where kings are crowned. Where blood oaths are bound. Her pulse spiked. Why bring me here? Alaric faced her fully now. Because the covenant will not wait, he said. And because you deserve truth before they force their version of it upon you. Ivy hugged her arms to herself. You keep saying I'm a key. Or Silverlight. Or something that doesn't sound human. Alaric stepped closer, careful not to crowd her. You are human, he said firmly. But your bloodline is touched by something older than my kind. Touched how? Alaric gestured toward the pool. Look. Ivy approached hesitantly and peered into the water. At first she saw only her reflection, pale, tired, eyes too bright for someone who'd nearly died. Then the surface rippled. Images bloomed within the pool like ink in water. A woman standing in moonlight, her hair silver white, her eyes human but glowing faintly. A vampire kneeling before her, head bowed. Blood mixing. Light flaring. A city burning and then rebuilt. Ivy staggered back, breath shaking. That's not me. No, Alaric said softly. That is your ancestor. Her heart thundered. What does that have to do with me? Alaric's voice dropped. Long before the Covenant, before the courts and thrones, there were humans who could walk between night and day without being consumed by either. Ivy shook her head. You're saying I'm what? Half vampire? No, he said immediately. You are something rarer. She laughed weakly. You keep saying that like it's good news. Alaric's gaze was steady. It is dangerous news. The water shifted again. This time Ivy saw herself. Not as she was now, but standing beside Alaric, the city behind them, light and shadow woven together. She gasped. That hasn't happened. Not yet, Alaric said. Her chest tightened. Is that a prophecy? It is a possibility, he corrected. One of many. She turned on him, panic rising. I don't want possibilities. I want my life back. Alaric's jaw tightened. The Covenant will not allow that. Anger flared through her fear. You don't get to decide that. His eyes met hers, unwavering. Neither do they. The air shimmered suddenly. Ivy felt it, pressure building like the world drawing breath. Alaric stiffened. They're here. Who? The Covenant. The chamber doors trembled. A voice echoed through the stone, layered and cold. Alaric Veilcrest, it intoned. You stand accused. Ivy's heart slammed. Alaric stepped in front of her without hesitation. The doors burst open. 5 figures entered, cloaked in pale robes marked with sigils that burned Ivy's eyes to look at too long. Their faces were hidden, but their presence carried weight, ancient, absolute. The human is to be surrendered, the voice continued. Her existence violates the accord. Ivy's blood pulsed hot. Alaric's voice was ice. She is under my protection. The accord outranks your crown. Alaric laughed softly. It was not a kind sound. My crown predates your accord. The runes beneath Ivy's feet flared. One of the cloaked figures hissed. You would risk war for her? Alaric did not hesitate. Yes. The word cracked through the chamber like thunder. Ivy stared at him, stunned. Alaric. He didn't look back. Stay behind me. No, she said, surprising herself with the strength in her voice. Everyone froze. She stepped forward, heart pounding, until she stood beside him again. I'm not a thing you get to pass around, Ivy said, voice shaking but loud. I didn't ask to be born like this. I didn't ask to save him. But I did. And I'm still human enough to choose. The Covenant figures murmured. One turned its hidden gaze on her. Child, you do not understand. Then explain it, Ivy snapped. Instead of threatening. Silence. Alaric looked at her, really looked, and something in his eyes changed. Pride. The Covenant spoke again, colder now. There is another way. Alaric's body went rigid. No. The bond can be sealed, the voice continued. Controlled. If the girl willingly binds herself to the night court. Ivy's breath caught. Bind how? Alaric turned to her sharply. You do not have to listen to them. The Covenant ignored him. A queen's oath. The words rang in the chamber. Ivy's heart stumbled. Queen? Alaric's eyes flashed. You will not. The Covenant cut him off. If she refuses, she will be hunted. By us. By the Bloodlords. By every faction that senses her light. Ivy's stomach dropped. Alaric's voice was lethal. I will burn this city to ash first. And the humans above? The Covenant replied smoothly. Will you burn them too? The silence that followed was unbearable. Ivy looked up at Alaric. For the first time she saw the full weight of his crown, not power but responsibility crushing down on his shoulders. This is why you held back, she whispered. He didn't deny it. You'd sacrifice yourself, she realized. But not them. Alaric's jaw clenched. I will find another way. The Covenant's voice was final. You have one night. Then they vanished, dissolving into light and smoke. The chamber fell quiet. Ivy's knees buckled. Alaric caught her instantly, arms steady around her. I'm sorry, he murmured into her hair. I never wanted this for you. She pressed her forehead against his chest, shaking. They want me to be a queen. He closed his eyes briefly. They want to control you. She pulled back, meeting his gaze. And you? His voice was low, honest. I want you alive. Her chest tightened painfully. And if being queen is the only way? She asked. Alaric looked away. Which was answer enough. Ivy swallowed hard, fear and resolve tangling together. I won't be hunted, she said quietly. And I won't be your weakness. His eyes snapped back to hers. You are not my weakness. She shook her head. You hesitate because of me. They see it. Alaric's voice broke, just a fracture. Because I care. The admission hit her harder than any bullet. Ivy breathed in slowly. Then she straightened. If I do this, she said, it's not because they force me. Alaric stared at her. Ivy. It's because I choose, she finished. And if I choose, then I choose my terms. Silence. Then Alaric dropped to one knee before her. The gesture stole her breath. I will not bind you without your will, he said. And if you say no, I will fight until my last breath to protect you. Her eyes burned. I know, she whispered. She looked down at the moon well, at the silver glow in her reflection. At the city that now knew her name. I was nobody yesterday, she said softly. And nobody ever fought for me. She looked back at him. But you did. Alaric's gaze was fierce, tender, terrified. And now, Ivy said, heart-pounding, I won't let them destroy you to get to me. She extended her hand. Teach me what it means to be queen, she said. Alaric's breath hitched. The moon well flared with light. Somewhere deep beneath the city, ancient magic awakened, recognizing a choice freely made. And the night held its breath. The moon well did not roar. It did not explode with fire or lightning or any of the dramatic fury Ivy had imagined magic would bring. It listened. When Ivy extended her hand and spoke the words that reshaped her fate, the ancient pool responded the way deep water always does, with stillness first. The silver glow beneath the surface smoothed, calming, as if the magic itself were holding its breath. Alaric remained on one knee. Not because the covenant demanded it. Not because the court was watching. But because for the first time in 5 centuries, a choice stood before him that did not belong to war or survival, but to trust. You must understand, he said quietly, his voice steady despite the storm in his eyes. Once this begins, the night will recognize you. Not as mine, but as its equal. Ivy's fingers trembled, but she did not pull them back. I don't want a throne, she said. I don't want servants or fear or people bowing because they're afraid. Alaric lifted his gaze to hers. Then you will terrify them far more, he said softly. Because you will rule without cruelty. The runes beneath Ivy's feet warmed. Not burned, warmed. She inhaled slowly, grounding herself the way she used to before walking into another double shift she didn't think she could survive. I spent my whole life being invisible, she said. Talked over. Pushed aside. Treated like I didn't matter. Her voice steadied. I won't let that happen to anyone else. Human or nightborn. The moon well shimmered. Alaric rose slowly, never taking his eyes off her. Then kneel, he said, not as a command but an invitation. Ivy hesitated only a heartbeat before lowering herself to the stone. The cold did not bite. It welcomed. Alaric stepped into the pool. The silver light climbed his boots, his legs, his hands, until it wrapped around him like memory made visible. He cut his palm, clean, precise. Dark blood welled. Not spilling. Waiting. By ancient law, he said, voice carrying far beyond the chamber, a queen is crowned not by blood taken, but by blood shared. Ivy swallowed hard. And by choice, she added. Alaric's mouth curved faintly. And by choice. He extended his hand. She took it. When their blood touched, the world shifted. Not violently. Inevitably. The moon well surged upward, silver light wrapping around Ivy like wings unfolding. She gasped, not in pain but in sensation. Heat bloomed in her chest, racing through her veins, chasing away fear like dawn scattering shadows. She saw things. Not visions, but truths. The city above, fragile and loud and unaware. The night court below, ancient and restless. The bloodlords watching from the edges, calculating. The covenant recoiling, not from power but from something worse. Oh. The light receded slowly, settling into Ivy's skin like starlight beneath flesh. She collapsed forward. And Alaric caught her. Not as a king. As a man. He held her until her breathing steadied, until the tremor in her hands eased. When Ivy finally lifted her head, the world felt clearer, sharper, quieter and louder at the same time. She could hear the city breathing. She could feel the night, no longer pressing, no longer hunting. It was waiting. Alaric rested his forehead against hers. It's done, he murmured. The night recognizes you. Ivy swallowed. Do I look different? Yes, he said honestly. She tensed. Then he smiled, truly smiled, not sharp or cold but soft. You look unafraid. The chamber doors opened slowly. Casimir stood there, frozen, eyes wide with awe and something dangerously close to joy. "My king," he whispered. Then corrected himself, voice trembling. "My queen." The title landed like a weight, and a promise. Ivy exhaled. "That's going to take some getting used to." Alaric huffed a quiet laugh. The night court gathered quickly, not summoned but drawn. They filled the outer hall, eyes lifted as Ivy and Alaric emerged side by side. No one knelt at first. They stared, measured. Then one figure stepped forward, a night-born woman with scars etched into her jaw. She lowered her head. Not to Alaric, to Ivy. One by one they followed. Not because they were forced, but because they felt it. The night had chosen. High above, the covenant reacted. The accord shattered, not with war but with irrelevance. They could not hunt what the night itself protected. The bloodlords retreated, furious but cautious. A queen who ruled by choice was far more dangerous than one born of fear. Days passed. Then weeks. Ivy learned the rhythms of the night court, not as a ruler issuing commands but as a listener. She spoke with servants and guards, healers and hunters. She remembered names. She asked questions. She demanded fairness. And slowly the city beneath the city changed. Human disappearances stopped. Predators were punished. Shadows learned restraint. And Alaric watched her with something like wonder. One night, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the glowing city, Ivy leaned against the stone railing. "I'm still scared," she admitted. Alaric stood beside her, not looming, not guarding. Just present. "So am I," he said. She turned to him, surprised. "You? Afraid?" "Of losing you," he said simply. Her chest tightened. "I didn't choose this because of you," she said softly. "I know," he replied. "That is why I love you." The word hung between them. Not rushed. Not demanded. Earned. Ivy smiled, a small, real smile. "I love you too," she said. Below them, the city glowed, human lights above, night lights below, no longer separate but balanced. A waitress who once counted coins by streetlight now stood as queen of the night, not because she was born powerful, but because she chose courage when it mattered. And the vampire king who had ruled through fear now ruled beside a woman who reminded the darkness how to be merciful. The night did not conquer the world. It learned to protect it,